It is the morning sports desk on a Monday, the 1st of April. No April Fool's jokes for us, unless it's that we're replacing Corey because he's out sick for the afternoon. For the rest of his day, he showed up for his air shift, decided to go home. So we're pulling in Zeke on fill-in duty today. Hey, Zeke, how's it going?
Good. Yeah. Corey stopped in my studio quick this morning to say goodbye. He stopped in, opened my door, said, "Sorry, your bracket took a dump," and then he left. So thanks, Corey.
Yeah, he moves into first place in our Basketball Mayhem 2024 Bracket Challenge, brought to you by the Liquor Depot in Staples. He takes that slight lead with 79 points in our VIP group. Kyle jumps into second place with 76. Zeke at 66, and I'm down there at 51. I take solace in the fact that I'm ahead of Mike Melanich, our sales guy, and the Liquor Depot in the bottom two. I will say I got UConn left, and they're my national champion. That is the only team I have left in my bracket. Zeke, I'll give you the floor here. What went wrong in your bracket this week?
I didn't pick UConn or Purdue. I think that's what went wrong. I had Illinois losing to Tennessee in the championship, so I have no Final Four teams left. So I'm dead in the water at this point. But who would have thought, based on what we saw from Purdue last season and from points of the season this year, that they would turn it on the way that they have in the month of March? I mean, Zach Edey. You look at just the disappointment that he had in the tournament last year, the first round exit as a top seed, decides to come back. He's now a two-time defending Big Ten Player of the Year, and this kid just looks phenomenal here at the end of March.
Yeah, it's crazy how much they've had playoff failure after playoff failure. And this is the year that things just kind of click. And now they're in the Final Four and they've been a monster. They've been like, it hasn't been close. It's not even like they've had to muscle through teams. They've just been pounding them, playing their style of basketball and just really haven't had anybody come close to beating them yet.
Yeah, and it's always the thing that concerns me in the NCAA tournament is picking Big Ten teams, because it seems like Big Ten teams always kind of fizzle out. We haven't had anybody in the championship since I think it was Illinois in the early 2000s. I think
Michigan State maybe
Michigan State,
like 09.
They won it in
but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and so I'm always hesitant to pick that Big Ten team, but man, Purdue has looked the part as a national champion. Maybe the only team that has looked better than them so far has been defending champ UConn, and they're on a roll too.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, you know what? I just remembered Wisconsin in 2015 because they beat undefeated Kentucky, and then they lost to Tyus Jones and Duke.
That's right.
But that's almost a 10-year poll now, so I think our point still stands.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, UConn and Purdue feels like the most obvious national title game at this point. And if that's the case, what a game is that going to be?
It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, you feel bad for kind of the outliers there. Alabama, kind of a not local connection, but regional connection with Grant Nelson, former NDSU Bison standout, finishes his 4 years with the Bison, transfers to Alabama, and he just blows up out of nowhere, getting national headlines, the Devil's Lake native. So if you're looking for an underdog team to root for from North Dakota, Grant Nelson and the Crimson Tide, a great option there. Then NC State, the 11th seed, went on a huge run in their conference tournaments, and maybe that was their feel-good story, and now here they are. Burns Jr., this 6'9", probably like 500 pounds guy, just doesn't look like a basketball player, has them in the Final Four, and that's another great story. So any of these 4 teams could be fun to watch here this next weekend.
Yeah, the first time that NC State has made the Final Four since Jimmy V, which is a fun story in and of itself. Yeah. Bring in Survive and advance back in 2024.
Yeah, and I mean, any of these teams, I'd be happy winning it. UConn, back-to-back champions. They haven't had a back-to-back champion in college basketball, and so maybe Duke. I think Duke did it in the early 90s. It just doesn't happen very often, especially with the transfer portal these days and NIL money and just people jumping ship all over the place. Saw with the Gophers, 3, 4, 5 guys leaving Ben Johnson to go different places, and to be able to do that back-to-back seasons the way that UConn has done it, it's basically unheard of these days.
Right. And, you mentioned the story with Grant Nelson transferring from NDSU as a grad transfer. And I think sometimes in the transfer portal, some stuff kind of gets lost. And obviously there's a lot of mess that involves the transfer portal, and it can frustrate everybody. But then, on the flip side of things, he was not a guy who was really highly recruited coming out of high school at all. And he has a nice career at NDSU, transfers into Alabama, and it's a big reason why they get to the Final Four as a grad transfer. So it's that part of it where a guy who didn't necessarily have the high school numbers gets into college, probably has a growth spurt, develops into his body a little bit more, and then can really become a nice Division I player. And that's kind of the fun part. That's the glass half full perspective of the transfer portal.
Yeah, being able to rebuild on the fly like that. And I was covering the Bison last year, and Grant, why are you going to Alabama? You can go anywhere you want. And he picks the Crimson Tide for basketball. I mean, Alabama, it's a football school. Well, not anymore, thanks in large part to Grant and the things he's doing down there, putting Alabama on the map. I think the first SEC team in a very long time. I think Auburn got there a handful of years ago to get to the Final Four.
2019, I think, when it was in Minneapolis. Yeah.
So SEC doesn't get there very often, similar like the Big Ten. SEC football conference, and now here's Alabama is knocking on the doorstep of a national championship in basketball.
Exactly. Yeah. Who would have thought they got into the Final Four in college football and now college basketball? And especially with Saban leaving, maybe they are transitioning into that basketball school.
Wouldn't that be great?
So looking at the standings in the leaderboard. So these are the people who are competing for the $100 gift certificate to the Liquor Depot on our listeners. Shout out to Corey Wilson in first place with 92 points. And I think we got to give a shout out to his competitor right behind him with 86 points. Zeke, that's also Corey Wilson. He's got two brackets.
And they're both competing for the top spot.
They're both in the top spot. Michael Willis has 84 points in third place. John Hillica has 80 points in fourth place. Kenny Callahan and Corey Tackman are tied with 79 points. Also, Daniel Warmbold has 79 points.
Go
78
Kenny
points. 78 points for Brandon Fay and Jake and Tyrell. And you can look at the full standings and the full leaderboard at WadenaRadio.com. Just click on the Basketball Mayhem. But I think we got to give the shout out to Corey Wilson. How the heck does he have two brackets? I can't even have one that's halfway passable.
Yeah, I want to see who he has winning, because that's impressive to have two at the top of the leaderboard there. And he's just coming out of nowhere on both of them.
His final fours are the same because me and Corey looked at this right before Corey left, and we hopped on to do the show. He has UConn, Alabama, Houston, and Purdue as his final fours.
That would do it.
When you get 3 out of the 4 Final Four teams, you're going to sit in a pretty good spot. He has UConn and Houston in the national championship game, with UConn winning it all.
Yeah,
so
he has NC State in the Elite Eight. He had Houston beating NC State. It looks like How do you what?
How? I have a brother who's doing like a work bracket with some friends, and he's like, I'm getting my butt kicked by a girl who just picked teams based on their uniform colors.
Right. Yeah.
That's what makes the NCAA tournament so fun, is you can just kind of go off on a whim. And the more you think about the bracket, the more like analysis you put into it, typically the worse off you're going to be, because this tournament's just so crazy.
Exactly. That's the beauty of March Madness, is nobody knows what's going to happen. I was listening to Dan Patrick this morning. He had Auburn coach Bruce Pearl on, and they of course lost to Yale in the opening round of the tournament. He's making excuses about this happened and the officials were bad and this and this and that. And no, it's March Madness. And that's what happens. 13's over 4 all day, baby. All day.
And it's funny because there are teams, like, everybody kind of, either you glom onto a team that has a hot run at the end of the season like NC State, or you stay away from them because you go, oh well, they that's the team everybody's picking. I don't want to jump on that bandwagon. Exactly. And I guess we all should have jumped on the NC State bandwagon in hindsight, because they were a team that's playing well at the right time, and that's the fun part.
Yeah, I jumped on the Oregon bandwagon because they were in a similar spot as NC State, but didn't have that Wolfpack magic.
Right. They got a couple. They got a win.
They got a win, but not as many as I needed them to make my bracket worthwhile. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So UConn is my only Final Four team left. So I need them. I have them winning the whole tournament. So that's how I can get a few more points and try and salvage my bracket. I think Corey has. I think he's done. I think all of his Final Four teams are out. All the teams he had picked. I'm pulling the bracket up right now to take a look at Corey's bracket here. He had UConn, Arizona, Marquette, and Purdue. So never mind. He had 2 of the 4, but he has Arizona and Purdue in the national championship game. So he's got a chance with Purdue.
There you go. I guess I did have UConn. I have UConn beating Arizona tonight, but then losing to Tennessee in the championship. So I have UConn left, but they're going to,
Yeah. When you have them getting to the Final Four and that's it, you're like, well, take what you can get. That's kind of where things stand. If you want a full look up here of the Basketball Mayhem 2024 Bracket Challenge, brought to you by the Liquor Depot and Staples, again, WadenaRadio.com, the place to go. Just click on it. You can look at all of our brackets. You can make fun of mine and Zeke's and Corey's, and just admire it a little bit more, because I mean, when you can do that, you should take a victory lap. So
Yes.
we'll see how things shake out, and we'll take another look at it later in the week once we get close here. Again, now the games are on Saturday and Monday. Are away. So Zeke, let's transition now. Let's talk a little bit more basketball, and let's stick with the Wolves in the NBA, who kind of got in their own way last night. They lost something like 109 to 101 or something along those lines. They lost to the Chicago Bulls, who are I think the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, but that doesn't mean anything because they have a losing record there. Not great. And on your home floor, coming off what could have been the Wolves' best win of the season, pounding Denver into the dirt on their full floor. Now you come back home and you have, I think that's about as big of a trap game as you could ever have.
Yeah, and that seems to be an issue with the Wolves year in and year out. I know the kind of unrelated issue here, but talking about that Twins long playoff streak that started in 2004. Well, last year's Twins, they didn't care about that losing streak. The fans do. And it's kind of in the mind of the fans, Wolves fans, these trap games, you beat Denver in arguably the biggest game in this franchise's history since game 83 against Denver to get into the playoffs for the first time in forever a couple years ago. Now you're battling Denver for the top overall seed. You beat them handily, and then you return home and you lay an egg in the final 5 minutes against a Chicago Bulls team that they're going to be in the play-in tournament here in the East. The East is terrible. I think 3 teams below 500 will make the playoffs in the East. Where you look at the West, and the Golden State Warriors like 5 or 6 games above 500 in the 10 spot.
They're fighting for their lives. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So Chicago fighting for playoffs positioning, and they showed it in the final 5 minutes. I mean, outscoring the Wolves, going a 10-0 run, pull ahead. Wolves led by 3. The game was theirs to take, and they just didn't have the juice left in the final moments of the game. And now they're back in 3rd place, half a game behind OKC and Denver in the West, and they're running out of time to maybe make a run and win their first, not just division championship since 2004, but have their first number 1 overall seed ever, I think.
Yeah, it would be. And that'll be the interesting part here, because I'm looking up their final schedule here to end the season. There's under 10 games left. I think there's maybe like 9 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
We're in April now. Like, the season doesn't have that many more games left. Wolves have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games left on their schedule. They have a little homestand here as they play the Rockets tomorrow at home, and then they play the Raptors on Wednesday. Then they travel to Phoenix, travel to the LA Lakers, are at home to play the Wizards, and then go back on the road to play the Nuggets on April 10th, and kind of their last real big game of the season. Then they host the Hawks and the Suns for 2 games to wrap up the regular season. But yeah, Zeke, you're right. This is the home stretch, and losing that could be big. The Wolves dropped to 3rd in the Western Conference standings. We know the Wolves are going to be in the top 3. We just don't know which seed. And if the season ended today, the Wolves would play the Pelicans, and that is not a first-round matchup I don't think Minnesota wants, because Zion has been a problem for the Wolves over the years. So trying to avoid that would be huge. And I think this is just a game where there's a couple things I took away. One, I'm trying not to and I don't think you are, Zeke, but I'm trying not to overreact to this loss. I'm trying not to like skies falling. This is still a good team. Defense is great, everything. But the flaws in this Wolves team definitely showed, which is that, they ran out of juice at the end, but their defense, I thought, played better as the game went on. But they played with their food a little bit, meaning they were down most of the game, 10, 15 points to the Bulls, and had to play catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And they took a lead late, but then fell apart at the end. And they had to spend all of their energy just trying to get back in it, instead of just controlling and getting out in front early. So that's something to keep in mind, is they don't start games great. And their offense just is fine, but it's not what you expect. To win the finals, you typically need to be top 6 in offense and defensive efficiency. Wolves are like top 3 in the NBA in defensive efficiency. That offensive thing, they're more middle of the NBA, and that's been the concerning part. And I know everybody wants to pretend that Karl Anthony Towns is useless on this team, but those are a game where just be really nice to have his 3-point shooting to kind of add to things. Edwards is great. He's going to be a great player. That outside shooting game still isn't consistent. And that's why it feels like he kind of hasn't had that 40-point game in a while, because it just feels like that outside shooting game takes just a little bit too long to get going. Sometimes Ant wants to play 5-on-1. These are all nitpicks, but When you're a team like you talked about, Zeke, that's trying to find the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, you have to kind of look at those nitpicks and try and improve them and get better. So I think my takeaway really is just the Wolves' lack of, because at the end of the day, they only gave up 108-ish, 109-ish points. That should be good enough to win you an NBA game, especially for a top team in the West. They just didn't have the shooting night they wanted, and the Bulls shot the lights out, Caruso especially.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a game where the Wolves should have won, and it's where in the playoff offense, and there might be some games where you have to get into a shooting match, and if that's the case, the Wolves are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and it would be very nice to have Karl-Anthony Towns back in those games. I'm not sure timetable what that knee is looking like, but when he initially underwent surgery, it sounded like he could potentially be back for the end of the season, first round of the playoffs, in kind of a best case scenario kind of thing. So yeah, the Wolves definitely miss the outside shooting. I think just the flat out offense of Karl-Anthony Towns last night. You were mentioning those teams are playing these final 8 or 9 games, CJ. And you mentioned the Suns twice. They're the 8th seed right now, so they're trying to sneak into that top 6. The Lakers, they're the 9th seed. They're trying to sneak in and gain some ground in the playoffs. The Rockets, they're 2 games behind Golden State in the standings right now. And so you talk about matching the energy of the Bulls last night. It's basically playoff games for the rest of their opponents the rest of the way, minus like Toronto and Washington. Yeah, those are the 2. And you can maybe, after what happened last night, you can categorize those as trap games too, because you look at some terrible games for the Wolves this year when they almost lost to Detroit early on the season, almost lost to Detroit twice this year. And it's maybe mentally they're not prepared for these kinds of teams. Like, it's Washington, they have 19 wins all year. We're going to look past them. And they've done that with San Antonio a couple times this year too, where the Spurs beat them. The 19-win Spurs beat the Wolves, who are going to have 55-plus wins in the NBA this season. And especially down the stretch here, you can't get into those mental trap game mindsets of, these guys, they're out of it, they don't care, because they do. There's still a lot of pride on the line with a lot of these teams, and especially with the Suns twice, the Lakers, and all these teams vying for playoff position and potential playoff matchups, depending on who comes out of the play-in tournament as that 7 and 8 seed. I mean, the Wolves could potentially see those teams if they're in that 1 or 2 spot.
Right, exactly. There's still a lot that needs to happen. Even though there's only 8 games left, there's a lot that can kind of fluctuate throughout that final stretch run here in the final 2 weeks of the NBA campaign. So we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll keep following it. But for now, that's kind of where things sit with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Zeke, let's wrap up our discussion today and let's talk a little Twins baseball. They opened the season 2-1. They had their first loss yesterday, losing 11-0 to the Kansas City Royals in a game where, the ball went over the fence a little bit too much. Is that maybe would that be the newspaper headline of the game?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. 11-0. Fans are freaking out. It's one game, Bailey Ober, he's going to be just fine. 2-1. I'll take 2-1 leaving Kansas City, because that's kind of where I had them leaving anyways, because the Royals, they're going to be a top 3 team in the division, and to get 2 out of 3 from them I don't think that's bad. The thing that impressed me most was the late inning offense in the first 2 games, where I think they had 7 runs in the 8th or 9th innings or something like that, just clutch hits, adding on runs. I think that should be the big takeaway is the way the Twins got some clutch hitting from Buxton and from Vasquez in game 2. I think Buxton had 2 doubles. Willie Castro making some moves on the bases. I think that should be the headline, the storyline, leaving Kansas City versus the 11-0 clunker yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. I had somebody put out there on social media yesterday and went, I'm starting to think the Twins might not go 162-0 this year. So those losses are going to happen. Yeah, Bailey Ober, I think, is going to be just fine. There's a lot of people freaking out on social media again yesterday. They're like, well, he's not going to be a number 3 starter. What were the Twins thinking, expecting? He'll be fine. His numbers aren't great at Kauffman Stadium. It's fine. And like you said, the Twins went 2-1, which is winning 2 out of 3 games. If you do that every series, you're going to win a lot. And it's the Mariners GM is getting a lot of, I'll say, clowned on social media for what he said after the regular season last year, which was, we want our team to win 54% of their games. And everybody kind of freaked out about that because 54 sounds low. But when you think about it, that's a 540 winning percentage. That's typically gonna get you into the playoffs every single year. And that's what kind of baseball is, a grind, and you can't judge it like a football game where when you lose one game you have to make big sweeping takeaways and all things like that. So yeah, there was a clunker. They'll have that. You won 2 out of 3 in Kansas City. Now they have a day off today. They're going to play 2 in Milwaukee, and then they'll come back Thursday to Target Field for the home opener against Cleveland. I think the big thing, Zeke, in this opening series, I agree with you 100% on your takeaways. The big thing is going to be Royce Lewis, because he's on the 10-day IL, but that's more of semantics because he's out for a month at least. The Twins said they're shutting him down for a month and they're going to reevaluate, which doesn't mean that on day 31 they go, wow, you're going to come back into the lineup tomorrow. That means, okay, at day 31, now what's our timetable? How long are you out for? He avoided a tear of his quadriceps, which would have been season ending. And he's going to miss the first couple months before he comes back. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels like a 2-month miss. And even if he misses the whole first half, well, that's fine because Royce Lewis missed and still ended up being pretty impactful for the Twins. So I think overall it's not ideal, obviously, but yeah, if there's ever a time for an injury to happen, it's early in the season where there's still plenty of time to overcome. The only thing was typically that meant, okay, cool, we'll call up Brooks Lee, the guy we're all excited for. Well, he's got back issues. He's going to be out for the first month of the season. Jose Miranda, you're not quite ready to call him up. Austin Martin, who made his big as a pinch runner, then made his first big league start on Sunday afternoon. That's basically where things shake up. What's your kind of news to the Twins injury front over the first 3 games?
We talked about it on the preview show last week, and that's DeScalfani. I mean, it's another big blow to that rotation. Done for the year. Forearm issues, and it just. I sent a text to my buddies.
What was your favorite moment of the DeScalfani era?
Exactly. Yeah. When the Twins looked over that injury report and the physical in depth to be like, oh yeah, you're good to go. Just another Molly situation. The Twins is 0-2 on these swings by bringing in guys in the rotation. And to make the Molly deal worse, they gave up 2 or 3 good prospects that are starting for Cincinnati. And you know, those guys could be impactful in the infield for the Twins right now had they not made that deal. And I mean, it was Jorge Polanco, who's, you know, maybe his time as a Twin had come to an end because we do have Royce Lewis, we do have Brooks Lee, we have a lot of these solid young middle infielders on the way, and so you're able to bolster the rotation, you're able to bolster the bullpen with Topa, who's also hurt at this point, and you kind of scratch your head and wonder what's going on with some of these moves that they're making, because DeScalfani does have an injury history. Yeah, they didn't. I don't know. I'm more frustrated about that than I am about Royce Lewis, because at least Royce Lewis, we were expecting to get banged up at some point in the season with a freak injury, rounding second base, trying to stretch, you know. But the DeScalfani thing, I just think for management is unacceptable, because it appears he was hurt when the Twins dealt for him.
Yeah, he definitely. It felt like it was kind of like a throw-in piece, because DeScalfani never pitched for the Mariners. He was traded from the Giants to the Mariners.
Yeah.
And then the Giants were like, here, you have to take his salary. And for the Twins' credit, like, I think the Mariners are paying a lot of his salary. But yeah, like, he was kind of thrown in to be this extra guy at the end of the rotation to help bolster some depth. And well, that basically just got wiped right off the board before he really even had a chance to make an impact, which, you know, Louis Varland takes his spot. In the short term, it feels like it's fine, because Louis Varland is better than DeScalfani at this point in his career. Mm-hmm. But if any of those 5 guys get hurt on the Twins rotation, who's that next man up? And that's going to be the question. Is it Brent Hedrick? It's not going to really excite anybody. Yeah. David Festa is a pitching prospect who's kind of in that Ober mold of like a really tall guy from a minor college, kind of built through the Twins system. Simeon Woods Richardson, who they got in the Garver trade. Like, there's a couple arms, but nobody's like, you're not like, oh my goodness, like this young stud is on the way. So
we have Jose Barrios coming up or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And so now Lopez is good. Ryan had a very good first start, I thought. So, those 2 guys will anchor the top, but yeah, once you get throughout the season, You know, how are those guys on the back end of the rotation going to be? Because even when the Twins a couple years ago with Gray and Ryan, when they were both really good, that back end of the rotation was so bad that like it didn't matter how good they pitched because you'd go 2 and 3 every 5 games with those guys. But yeah, it's not a great start to that. We'll have to monitor it and see how things play out. The good part is at the beginning of the season, they got those built-in off days, which kind of can help stretch that rotation just a little bit further. But we'll see. Chris Paddock, I think, I think it is Louis Varland who's going to make the start. Yeah. Yep, Varland tomorrow, Paddock on Wednesday, and then Pablo Lopez gets the season opener and the home opener.
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun one. I think the main takeaway is the Pablo Lopez Cy Young campaign is off to a good start.
I agree. Yeah, he's got a chance to make another big statement. When Cleveland's starting the season 3-1, I mean the Tigers are 3-0, the Guardians are 3-1, the Twins are 2-1. I mean it's going to be a really competitive division this year. Maybe Cleveland doesn't. I mean, I think eventually Kansas City takes over Cleveland for that top 3 spot. But as it starts right now, I mean Shane Bieber looks fantastic in Cleveland's opener. He looks to be back and firing all cylinders. And that Cleveland rotation is good, and that's about all Cleveland has going for them right now. So if the Twins can get to Cleveland early on Thursday, I think they continue the winning series. That's what they want to do at this point, is kind of keep the water out of the longboats until Royce Lewis and some of these other guys get back from injuries.
That's always my philosophy with teams, and it doesn't matter whether it's the Vikings, the Wolves, the Wild, the Twins. Just that first month of the season, don't sink the ship already. In 2016, they did that when they started like 0-9, and it's like, well, the season's over. Like we're not even 2 weeks in, and we just know that it's nothing good is going to come of it. 2018, they had a good first couple weeks, but by the middle of May, you're like, first or second week in May, and you're like, 3 games under 500, and we're looking a little real shaky. Are we going to do something? So avoid that in April. Even if you play just 500 ball, that's fine. And then hope to get hot at some point, and that kind of lifts you up. Just don't start the season like 5-12 is basically my mission every year.
Yeah, you could be like the Anaheim Angels, where they already had a players and team only meeting 2 games into the season with Ron Washington. They're like, okay, settle things down. Let's not let the season get away from us. So you could be in that situation. You could be in Houston's situation. They're 0-4. They just got swept by the Yankees to open the season, which, I mean, it's early, but still 0-4 start, and you get swept by, your playoff rival. So there are a lot of worse situations the Twins could be in, but I don't know. I'm trying to look at this from a glass half full kind of perspective. We're not Angels fans. We're not Astros fans right now.
Right. That's the good news. It could be a lot worse.
It could be a lot worse.
We talked about this stat me and Corey did on Friday's show. Is Mike Trout hit a home run to begin his season? Angels up 1-0. No other starter got a hit the rest of the game, and they lost 11-3.
Yeah.
That's the Mike Trout era. If only you could get paired with another great player like Shohei Ohtani or something. Imagine how many games.
Oh, that'd be sweet. Wouldn't that be awesome to have those 2 guys?
Imagine how many games he had. Do you think Ron Washington has a oopsie clause in his contract to go? Never mind. I'm going back to Atlanta.
Yeah, I feel so bad for that guy. I mean, he wanted to get back into managing because the stigma with Ron Washington is the World Series losses with Texas. And you want to kind of erase that, but the Angels job had to be the least appealing job in the majors, and
right,
it's a stepping stone job maybe for Ron, but he's no spring chicken. He's kind of ending the end of his coaching career maybe here too. So
it's maybe like a Ron Gardenhire situation. We took the Tigers job. It's like, I don't know how many more chances I'm going to get. So even though this isn't ideal, I want to be a manager again, and I'm just going to take it.
Yeah. And you have Mike Trout. Happens. Yeah, you have Mike Trout. You have Anthony Rendon. If he decides to play more than 85 games and not decide it's too many, it's I don't know.
If they ever want to develop a pitcher, like a pitcher for the Angels, that'd be ideal too. So one last thing, Zeke, and then we'll break for a Monday. What's your take on the uniform controversy? Because I kept watching all these games going, it looks ridiculous.
I hate them. I hate them so much. You looked at the Yankees in Houston, and these are not sweat resistant, and they just look damp and disgusting. And the pants are too tight and too see-through, and the numbers on the back are too small, and they look like a knockoff off-brand something. Yeah, I'm in the camp that's just color me unimpressed with the new MLB uniforms. These are just no. If I was a guy who bought and wore jerseys, I would pass on these and just look for something older, because these are garbage.
Well, like there's people who would buy like knockoffs from China, and and I was never one of those guys, because like I kind of want the real thing. I want them to look good, but after those, I'd be like, I'll buy the knockoffs in China, because they have just as
look the same. Yeah,
they look the same, and there's just as good of a chance that Fanatics, just like the factory in China, is going to screw up the uniform anyways. So at least I'm going to get half price. Like that's whether it's Nike or whether it's Fanatics, I don't care. It's bad. And the fact that Major League Baseball is just basically ignoring it and hoping people kind of forget. You can't forget when you have to look every single game at the uniforms. The pants don't even match the jerseys for half the teams. St. Louis's powder blues are out of stock. They don't have them, and they wear them every Saturday. How do you not prepare for that? Like, I don't know. I can't take any of these things seriously. Even the Twins don't look as bad, because the lettering and stuff. Like if they wore the old Twins uniforms, I think you notice it a lot more. But even look at the numbering. They feel cheap. And it'd be one thing if the jerseys were sold cheaper. Like, okay, well, the jerseys don't look great, but at least they're more accessible. No, they're more expensive, actually.
Jazz are going to lower prices on those.
So one part of me is like, they're just uniforms. Why am I getting so worked up about this? This doesn't really matter. And then another part of me is like, well, they're trying to give us a worse product for the same price or more expensive. I ain't put up for that. So yeah, I'm somebody who loves to buy jerseys, and I'm already getting to the point in my life where I probably just shouldn't be buying jerseys anymore. Like, but that's the thing of like, I'm like, this maybe is my reason to stop buying anything, because they just don't look. I'm not spending $150 on something like that where it's iron pressed. I've seen high school there.
Sorry, I kind of froze up. I was going to say the good thing about the jerseys, the one good thing about the jerseys is when you listen to the games on KWAD, you don't have to see the jerseys. So you can just make them up in your head how they look. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Make them up in your head. Okay. One last question from you, Zeke, and then we'll break. What was your reactions from Provis on the TV side and Atterbury on the radio side, and kind of their full-time debuts? Obviously, they've both done those jobs before, but now this is their first series in those roles going forward. What are your takeaways?
I think Corey Provis did a fantastic job on TV. I mean, you look at both of these guys and huge shoes to fill. You look at, Dick Bramer, who's called games since the early 1980s, and he's always been there. I loved the left-handed toast homage that Provis gave after the Twins won the season opener against Kansas City. And I think he's made for TV. I mean, he takes that radio side to it and brings the description and everything that's happening to the TV side, which I think is huge. Then you look at the radio side, and I mean, you go from Herb Carneal to John Gordon to Corey Provis, who I really liked as well, and now Chris Atterbury. Again, really big shoes to fill. I think he's filled in from time to time. He's still finding his groove, especially with Dan Gladden, who is a very unique personality in the way that he does color commentary. And so just they've called games before, but just trying to find that groove. And I think Atterbury will be fine. It sounded like he was, calling a season opener as the radio guy full time for the first time. But we've heard some great calls from Chris Atterbury over the years, filling in for Corey Provis. And I think once he hits that groove, I think they'll both be fine. But yeah, I was very nervous about Provis moving to the TV side, because it's a huge position, and with the future of Valley Sports North and what that means for broadcasts on TV and things like that. But I think they're both fine. I think Provis is going to take that TV job by the horns. I think he's one of the best broadcasters in baseball, and I think Atterbury could get there too. So it's just different, and I hate change when it comes to turning on the radio and listening to who's describing the game to me. But I'll overcome it, I think.
Well, it's like you said, the change is weird. It still felt weird not listening to Bramer, but at the end of the day, I was like, well, I'm still used to listening to Atterbury and to Provis call games on the call games. So like the voices aren't, it's just the way that they're in and the positions. And like you said, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. I think every once in a while, Provis, like you said, has that radio description. And it's maybe not a knock on Provis, it's maybe just going from Bramer to Provis. Bramer was very good at letting moments breathe and letting that kind of happen. Provis, because again, he's on the radio side, you can't let it breathe. You have to tell people what's going on. And so it's kind of, and he'll figure that out. Cause we talk about Provis. I mean, I forget he's done TV for the Big Ten Network for football and for basketball. So he's a guy who can, flip flop from one medium to another. But, like you said, in that full-time role, now that it's his, how can he do that? It'd be very interesting. Of course, Morneau, him and Morneau had some great conversations. I think on the radio side, not just Dan Gladden, Paul Molitor and Glenn Perkins are also going to be doing some color commentary as well. And I think the guys that the broadcasters are great. The former players and managers that they have paired with them on those make it, I think, even better. Like Twins broadcasts are really, really good. Case in point, and I'll end on this. The Royals broadcast mentioned Moran.
Giovanni Moran is the closer. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Twins have some good broadcasters. Don't take them for granted.
Yeah, I think one more point to make on that is one of the benefits that the Twins have, because you look at Detroit, they brought in the play-by-play guy for TV or radio from the White Sox, and you look at maybe when Provis started taking over for John Gordon, he came over from the Milwaukee organization. Well, now you have two guys that have been with the team for a very, very long time in different roles. And so they have a history with the team. They have a history with the players. They have camaraderie with the players, with management, with fans. And I think that's a huge boon to just making that transition a little bit similar, is because Provis has been here for 10 years. Atterbury has been here for 10 years. They've been through the ups and the downs, and they're just moving to a different part of the storytelling machine. So I think that's another huge boon for the Twins, is not bringing in somebody fresh who's never been here, who doesn't really know, because they've done that before. And they just have a good pipeline of bringing up these guys who start on the post-game download and then make their way to the producer. And Andrew Halverson does a great job with the Twins of finding these guys and making sure they fit the right spots. Because the Twins could have done a nationwide search for a TV guy. There's a lot of guys who would love to be the TV voice of the Twins. And they had the idea and the ingenuity to move Provis from radio to TV, and then bring Atterbury up, who's waiting in the minors, if you want to call it that. So I think that's another benefit for the Twins is having guys that the fans know, that the players know, that are familiar voices, just picking up the mantle like nothing's ever changed.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's easier for fans because they've already heard these guys. Going from Bramer is big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more. When you say we're moving on from Bramer, to move Provis into the full-time role, it's a lot easier for the fans to stomach that. So I agree with you 100%. All right. We could talk about the Twins for like 2 more hours, Zeke. So I think at some point we're going to need to end this discussion. So yeah, I think that'll do it. Thanks, Zeke, for hopping in. Welcome back on the Sports Desk anytime. We're going to have you throughout the Twins season. Hop on. So save all those Twins thoughts for next time. Okay.
Will do.
All right. This has been the Morning Sports Desk for Monday, April 1st.